I'm tempted to speak shortly because after me we'll hear a politician, a president that I admire a lot, President Lenin Moreno. He been capable, has been capable, politically speaking, with great social vision, and he was able to manage very, very complicated crises, and he was able to find a way. He was able to reinforce institution. He was able to move on and to lead the country to a clear democratic future. That was not an easy task. That was not taken for granted. As Usain said before, I was criticized in a very infamous way, but no worries. Once I criticized Lenin Moreno the same way. We have walked this way. It's been difficult. It's been difficult times for a democracy in our region. It has not been easy for democracy in our continent. Why? Well, because a democracy, as Hector said before, democracy works when we lose. That's an inflection point. We should understand that the best thing for politics is to be happy with our duty accomplished, to close democratic cycles, to open to power rotation is key for democracy. As someone said before as well, democracy is an ethical commitment. And I'll get back to this later on. For democracy, the most important thing is to reinforce institutions, to work with them, for them to be more and more present, more and more solid, that work in the state of law, guaranteeing the best governance conditions. The democratic institutionality is key. We are responsible. We have to be audited and supervised by the public opinion, and we have to react and to respond for our political actions. Democracy is based on a solid, strong institution that work better and better, that generate better living conditions to our people. And we shouldn't confuse democracy that are imperfect, almost all in the hemisphere, with dictatorship. We cannot confuse them. We cannot mix up both things. Dictatorships, we know them. They have been discussed and mentioned very clearly. We know why those conditions exist in those countries and not in democracies. I don't want to compare a case, but let's start in the beginning. The case of El Salvador. It's a very unique case. I was very critical of that situation and the crisis generated by that. But El Salvador is today, if President Bukele acts incorrectly in the upcoming times, he could be going to the place where Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Bolivia are already there with co-opted the judicial branches, with this dynamic of political prosecution. He's going that way. So are we going to accept that another country is going that way? No, we cannot accept that. We have to help so that democracy works in El Salvador. Or where is the ethical dimension? President Busquets has referred to the action of the judges of the Constitutional Court, but that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is that democracy, when exerted with majority, the majority of two-thirds, does not imply in co-option of branches. No, the independence of branches of powers should be respected, and that's the main principle of democracy. That majority is responsible for the independence of branches. It is responsible for the operation of the state of law the best possible way, and that's the key point in that regard. He should that into account, generating weights and counterweights, so that El Salvador is able to keep a democracy, to preserve democracy. That's the point. But we cannot mix up things. I have things, many absurd things these last couple of days. Okay, there shouldn't be a double standard for sure. But if we don't accept, if we haven't accepted the replacement of the judges of the Constitution Court in El Salvador, we cannot accept the appointment of the members of the constitutional judge in Venezuela by a Congress that is not legitimate. That is absurd. And that's why we shouldn't mix up things. We have to try to preserve independence. We should be audited, checked, monitored all the time. That's the advantage of democracy. When we exert a political position or a function from the democracy point of view, our mistakes are audited. We cannot commit abuses or excesses. And that's why it's so important, the balance of powers. That's why we need an independent Congress. That's why we need an independent and strong judiciary power. That's why we need the state institutions work the best possible way. Each institution is key, is fundamental in these processes. Now, why do we have imperfect democracies? What problems should we solve? We have structural problems that were already mentioned. To me, the most important ones are corruption, violence. We are a very, very violent hemisphere. 8% of the population of the world, and a high percentage of violent killings or deaths in the world. Corruption, on the other hand, in Venezuela is the most disgusting thing in terms of corruption in the history of humankind, and we could give other examples. Odebrecht, for example, paid bribes for millions and millions of dollars. In one case, Defensa, there was a corruption of $1.5 billion, the double of all the corruption of Odebrecht in 15 years, in only one case. That's why corruption is so bad. Some people speak about $3 billion. The lowest number is very important. It's almost like a plan Marshall for Venezuela, what they need today to recover. Violence, I spoke about that. Inequalities and poverty. We're the most unequal continent, and that is unacceptable. That's just like a stabbing democracy. That is unacceptable. The poverty we have in the continent, We cannot accept the inequality. We have a lot to do in that regard. If we don't resolve these structural problems, it's going to be very difficult to improve our democracies. And we also have some dynamics of instability. There's central lab for that is Cuba, no doubt. The instability in the hemisphere has been generated there for decades. They were exporting their guerrillas in the 60s, 70s. Then they found other more sophisticated ways of instability, and in the middle of the way, they found Bolivarian money, transforming the possibility of making democracies unstable. What is trafficking? What is organized crimes in political terms? It means money. Money that affects, that impacts the democratic systems. It's a stab. It hurts democracies. Seriously, if there was something that I really like to do in this world is to follow the Bolivarian money in the hemisphere from Canada all the way down to Chile and Argentina. We could clean up the political systems of the hemisphere, giving better conditions to work for democracy, to clean up that inflated money used in campaigns and political activities for so many years. There is a lot to do. Democracy is something that is worked on permanently. We cannot take this as granted. We cannot rest. We have to work. We have more and more rights to achieve, institutions to build. We have to generate better conditions and more effective ways to govern. Why do we have those dictatorships in the hemisphere? Well, they are clear evidence of the economic, social, and political failure. What is Cuba is not the clearest example of a political, economic, social, and productive failure. They destroy the whole economic apparatus. There is no social justice there.
¿Qué es el sistema bolivariano?
What is the Bolivarian system? Well, that's it. Even worse, because it's in a very rich country with all the resources. What do we see in Nicaragua and Bolivia but tremendous failures? Going the dictatorship way is to follow the way of failure, helping imperfect democracies so that they don't get lost in that way. It is important to do that job. Thank you.